So in 2010, I was working with an organization called In Defense of Animals, which was not direct action, but more legislative advocacy, animal rights oriented. And I met a group of individuals who had already been working in the rescue field, largely with Humane Society of the United States at that point. And we came together to form what they already knew was a desperate need in the country, which was an organization focused pretty much exclusively on large scale rescue, supporting law enforcement. And that is our primary focus is criminal cases, supporting law enforcement, where we conduct the extraction, the evidence collection, compile all of the reports, expert testimony, etc., and then shelter the animals for as long as necessary, provide testimony in court cases, and ultimately secure custody of the animals and place them. Now, in addition to doing those criminal cases, we also do a lot of what I call cooperative surrenders, which is somebody before law enforcement has gotten involved. Say it's a family member who has gotten sick and there's a lot of dogs involved, or it's a rescue that is failing and they want to end operations and surrender the animals over to another organization, things like that, where we can reach an agreement and a lasting solution, and law enforcement doesn't necessarily have to be involved because there isn't an element of intentional cruelty there, at least not always. And then the third thing that we do is when we can, we also do shelter relief for other overcrowded shelters, largely in rural areas that, just don't have the resources or the contacts to move the animals out as quickly as we can sometimes.
Just extraordinarily important work. And when I first got involved in thinking about animals, it was before 20, well before 2010. And I was mostly involved with the New York City Bar Association committee and mostly involved with the companion animal issues. And these were the huge gaps that y- like of course law enforcement wasn't going to do anything about this situation if they were going to end up with 300, like nobody knew how to handle it. So this is such, I know how important this work is. All right, let's, but before we move into details, I didn't know how to ask this question because there are many stories on your website. So can you just tell us a few stories just to give us illustrative cases of the kind of maybe a recent rescue or one that really stuck in your head of the on the ground reality of what the work is like?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. You'll have to stop me, but and there was a time when I could remember each case and the names of each case, but that time is long since gone. But there are ones that definitely stand out. Our very first operation in March of 2011 was a puppy mill here in Tennessee, and that was a, let's see, I made notes to help myself. That was 126 animals. So a really big rescue right out of the gate, and that was remarkable in several ways. We went into that operation with only about $10,000. So I was a nervous wreck. How are we going to conduct what was probably a 50 or $60,000 operation, at least with $10,000 in the bank? But between PetSmart charities at that point and wonderful donors and amazing volunteers, it worked. And it was a wonderful first operation to kick off on. It was a puppy mill, horrible conditions, uh, living animals with dead dogs. They were in hutches that had literally been sealed up for the winter with plastic around them. You couldn't really get in or out to do anything with them. So that was our very first case. And then since then, we've done over 200 operations. The largest one is right around 600 animals. And the smallest one is, as small as, five or six or seven animals, because sometimes in rural communities, if you have no facility or your facility is overcrowded, five or six animals is overwhelming and large to you. our most recent case, last Thursday, we just rescued 133 Chihuahuas that were living in a single residence, elderly couple facing health challenges. The kids moved back home to help and discovered that their parents were living in a essentially a nightmare of a house, massive amounts of feces. You couldn't even move the furniture because the feces had cemented around everything, and it was just horrible, high ammonia. So sometimes we're not only helping animals, we're also helping families. And I always like to think that we're also helping communities, because anytime you have suffering in a community, anyone who knows about that or can see it, it weighs on them. And they, how it is if you see a dog on a chain when you drive to work every day, it eats away at you. So I like to think we're also improving communities with every operation that we do.
It eats away at you, but for some people, it just makes them think that that's how it is. You get used people humans have an unbelievable talent for getting used to things. So witnessing that kind of cruelty, people just get used to it, and that's exactly the direction we don't want to go in.
That's true, and I know we're gonna talk about the South in particular, but I think that's one of the aspects of the South that, make it more challenging for animals, is that there's sort of this, ingrained or historical view of animals as less than, or, they can just be chained to a tree and that's good enough. And so I think that's one of the problems we deal with down here, is sort of a historical inappropriate conception of animals.
I interrupted you, and you were going to talk about a third case, I think.
I was going to tell you about a case we did a few years ago. It was called Operation Cage Tell. And the reason we named it that was, law enforcement officers went to the door because they had had a report of chickens being confined in the front yard in little wire pens. And so they actually went there as a call about the chickens, and they knocked on the door. And inside, they could see a very young child, less than, I think he was just about 12 or 14 months old, in a cage inside the house with large snakes all around in big aquariums. And that was enough to look for law enforcement to say, we've got a problem here. And so they called us, and we didn't know what to expect. But ultimately, there were a large number of dogs, a fair number of cats. There were chickens and rabbits and snakes. And then there were close to 600 fancy rats and mice. And the rats and mice were living in the worst conditions of any animals I've ever seen, and just in aquariums that had filled to the top with feces that they were literally pressed against the lid. It was nightmarish, and of course, we're there working until 2 in the morning, and law enforcement is like, "Are you really going to deal with the rats and mice?" And I was like, "Of course." Like, these animals have suffered greater than anyone on this property. And so we were there until the wee hours, counting and documenting every rat and mouse, separating them and bringing them back. And we worked so hard with those rats and mice. They had to be nebulized twice a day for their upper respiratory, but ultimately we got them all healthy and placed all of them. And I'm
Yeah.
really proud of that.